Welcome on to Searching for Mana, Eileen Burbridge.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'm sorry I'm not there in person.
Why are you not here in person?
Honestly, it's because I have 5 children in the house, just barely gotten them into bed, and I wouldn't have been able to make it down on time, but I wanted to help fill in what I think was a late cancellation from somebody else.
Thank you so much. So to start, formally Eileen is a founding partner with Passion Capital, a venture capital firm who've invested in many of the fintechs that we love and know about, such as Tide, Monzo, Go Cardless, and many more. I think you raised additional fund last year, Eileen, so we can talk about that and think about what you were looking to do with a fund several years ago, and then what you might be looking to do with a fund at the moment, with the emergence of obviously blockchain and a lot of trends in the Web3. The evening that we are hosting Mana Search has brought a diversity report out, which we've been working on for 5 months or so. Mimi Nguyen and Milad put together, where we cut up somewhere in the region of 12,000 employees from seed to Series C in the UK, employed in fintech, and looked at all the different types of segmentation and tried to look at potential determination. So it'd be really great to talk to you about that also. But just to start with, it'd be really kind if you could explain to the audience what you are up to and most excited about at the moment.
Again, thanks a lot for having me. And I really appreciate that really generous intro. What am I up to and what am I most excited about at the moment? It's a great question. And actually, I haven't reflected on that for a while. As you said, very generously, we have a number of, I think, what we'd call scaling stage fintech companies. So as you mentioned, Monzo, Tide, there's Marshmallow, there's Go Cardless, Ravelin, and I'm sure I'm going to feel bad about missing a couple of that I'm not name checking. But I'm also just as excited about the ones that are, just getting started. So as you mentioned, we are investing now out of Fund 3. We actually closed that. It feels like time is in some kind of a weird warp because of coronavirus, but we actually closed it in 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic. So we're into the second year of the fund. We've made 24 investments, a number of which are also in fintech. And some of those, it's a lot of fun at the, I guess I'd call it the fledgling stages. Really exciting to still be working on those kinds of propositions as well.
Thank you. And you're working in the real founding phase of the venture life cycle. Why have you stayed in that zone?
Yeah, I think the reason that we, and I'm speaking on behalf of Robert and Malin as well, I think the reasons that we at Passion really like staying pre-seed and working with the teams at these formative stages is because we all came through an operator and entrepreneurial route ourselves. With varying degrees of success. But I also think we would all want to keep doing that if we could spend the time and if we could commit the level of energy that we love to see founders doing directly. And so in a way, I've always said it's how I feel I live vicariously through the founders and the closest I can get to being in a startup myself without doing it. And so we just enjoy it. It's selfish. And I think the non-selfish bit about it is, I guess, because we enjoy it so much and we have that experience, we hope that that's the value that we can add. I'm not going to lie, I'm not the best person to talk, about sort of listing strategies, M&A possibilities. I mean, we have had those conversations, but I'm not late stage looking at extracting a couple more basis points out of somebody's profit margin, working out the model in order to try and make something slightly more efficient or greater productivity. I'm really into building the team, getting the team up and running, getting product market fits, go to market and all that. And that's really where we think we can lend the most value, but that's also what I enjoy the most.
Thank you. And what are you looking for when you're building the team in terms of the characteristics of the individuals, but also how they blend together?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've just nailed it in the way that you framed the question. It isn't just about specific skill sets or individual roles. It is about how people knit together and how complementary people come together to form a high-performing team. So obviously when we invest, we're investing in a founder group. It might be one founder, single founder, co-founders, or multiple founders. And it depends on their strengths and their development areas in terms of what we would suggest for them in their early hires. And it has to be a complementary team. There's something to be said for, being able to finish one another's sentences and, being on the same wavelength. And then there's also something to be said for diversity of thought and diversity of pathway and experience in order to get the best outcomes. And so I think it's that really fine balance that we hope to challenge our teams on when they're growing. And it depends if they're in a product development phase, if they're in a go-to-market phase, if they're in a customer acquisition phase, or where they are in their journey. It's always different.
How are you seeing the trend from several years ago, where those teams or individuals might have been more male-led, to today? The report that we've just, in real brief, gone through doesn't show much positive movement towards early phase founders, or really actually through series, actually seed to Series C, the C-suite being particularly massively diverse, particularly gender. Have you seen any positive trends really early on? And then the second part to that I'd like you to talk to is, what are you actively doing to try and encourage it?
Yeah, I was going to say, when you first started asking the question, I don't know if I've seen a massive difference, a massive enough difference, that's for sure, or even massive by any measure. And I was going to say it's still largely men, still largely male dominated, and still not as diverse as I'd like to see it, and where I'm sure that will be over time. But I think I appreciate that these things do take time. We're kind of off the back of generations and generations of societal influences and conditioning, and it's not going to, we're not going to be able to reverse it in even 5 years or 10 years. But I'd like to think that we're making progress, and I'm hoping that your report has shown that there's a little bit of progress, and that we weren't just standing still, or even worse, going backwards. In terms of what we try to do at Passion, it's a hard one because, like I said, we know that it takes time. But I guess what we like to think might help is, we do try to put ourselves forward as a diverse investment team ourselves. Obviously Malin and I with Robert, we're actually female dominated or female majority partnership. Our general counsel is also female, and our team administrator is also female. We're a very much female dominated team. We also have ethnic diversity, and we also have, nationalistic diversity. Malin was raised in Sweden. Robert was raised here in England. I was raised in America. And I think all of our different pathways and experiences help to contribute to a diversity of thought. And I hope that by putting ourselves out there, it might be enough for people to sort of think, oh, okay, that reflects a team that I would like to put together, or that reflects maybe my experience. So it means that it's possible for me to try and do something, or to put myself out there as well. And I hope that we, look amenable, agreeable, and that we're wanting to talk to really diverse groups, and maybe, non-conforming or unconventional founders and from different pathways. And we do try to talk about that as much as possible. I think that's really all we can do, if I'm honest. And we try to meet with, lots of different founders from all different backgrounds. We obviously try to back diverse founders as well. And I'm proud of the efforts that we've done there, but they're tiny, they're teeny, they're little drops in a massive bucket that we need to see, just loads more of, bucketfuls of, frankly. So it's only a small part, but hopefully it's a snowball effect, and we get there as a sector quicker as a result.
Thank you. And I was listening to, as I do, a YouTube clip of Charlie Munger the other day, and he was throwing out a load of his kind of quotes. One of them was, if you look at what an 11-year-old's hero looks like, you might have a good idea of what they'll end up becoming or doing. So I assume that, with individuals like you, Eileen, of course, there's great role models, and that can inspire people. But like you say, for there to be more is, of course, going to have a net effect. If you think about your own, I don't want to get too personal, but of course you've got 5 children. If you think about your children right now, who are you seeing at that kind of 7 to 11 age, their heroes being?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you're being really too kind and too flattering, so I can't really let that slide. I don't know that I'm necessarily anybody's role model, and I certainly, I think you used the word hero. I don't, I think that I just hope that there's some reassurance to people if they think, oh, I don't fit in to this room, this place, this conversation, that they would sort of see evidence that other people who haven't maybe always fit in or don't look like they fit in, that it's still possible to sort of, get there and be there. Um, in terms of your other question and what sort of my kids see, I mean, I think one thing is really clear when they think about tech and they think about innovation and they think about the apps on their phone, they do assume that they're all American. Everything probably comes from the States, whether it's Instagram, whether it's YouTube, whether it's House Party, whether it's, and actually TikTok being from ByteDance in China. I'm not sure that I suspect that's actually lost on them. And I think they just assume that's coming from America as well. But if you think about Netflix, Disney Plus, I mean, just all the influences for children do seem to come from America. And I think we are punching under our weight in terms of the innovation that comes out of the UK and what we can develop and sort of shout about a little bit more here. And so I continue to do that all the time, which I'm sure makes them roll their eyes. But I want them to recognize that it's possible here, and we do it here, and there's more to talk about and shout about here.
I mean, you've been in many different roles, an ambassador for the UK technology space. And of course, as you just say, people assume, and I mean, it has been the case that some of the biggest success stories have been out of America for all of time. It would feel in my life time anyway. You're starting to see some really positive trends across Europe. You're starting to see venture capital build out. And of course, you've got a fund, but we're starting to see American funds bring huge funds under management over here. I know that you're quoted as saying the financial system in the UK particularly is well predisposed to pop out businesses like Monzo's, because regulation is nationwide in preference to in states, and so on and so forth. So actually, if we took a 10-20 year time frame, can we compete? Can we see some of the biggest companies, the £100 billion plus companies, come out of the UK?
Yeah, I absolutely think we can. And I don't think I'd be here, doing this line of work if I didn't believe that. And I would even say we're already doing it. And that's why I kind of said before, I think we're punching under our weight. And I think, when I talk to my children and stuff, I'll remind them Deliveroo is British. Deliveroo was started here. Skype was here. They actually don't know what Skype is anymore. But, you kind of point to these cases, or ARM, these are British successes. So we can already compete. If you were Swedish, you'd sort of point to Spotify, you'd point to Klarna, and you'd point to Rovio coming out of Finland, for example. There's so many examples of actually non-US globally dominant players. It's just that it's somewhat distributed across all the non-US companies or countries, sorry. But there's so much that we do out of here in the UK. And I do think we're going to do more and more. And so to your question, fast forward 10 to 15 years, 100%, I'm convinced that we'll have globally dominant players that were born from, started up and scaled here in the UK.
And Eileen, if we think about maybe the main ingredient that can make a business great, it's many different things, but one might be an aspiring, brilliant leader with a particular vision. Of course, in the UK, Tom Bloomfield is one of the headline names for bringing about Monzo, which got an awful lot of stuff. Well, but he is not an operator. He is not driving that business anymore. And you might have been the first or a very early check into Monzo. For that to be all it could as a business, is that a shame that he's not operating that business? That doesn't feel very American.
Yeah, so I don't think it's a shame, because I think the business is doing phenomenally well right now, and it's probably stronger after the pandemic than it was as a business going in. And I definitely don't think it's a shame, because Tom is happier not running it than he was when he, was there, or certainly in the last year or so that he was there. So by no measure would I say it's a shame. I think it's a very good thing. I think we've come out at a really great place for both the business, but more particularly for him. That's what's most important. I would say that what the Monzo kind of case study or that journey shows is that not every startup founder, and I would say most, are not actually cut out to be the chief executives of a regulated bank. And I don't think that's un-American at all. I'm not sure that I can think of an example of a US tech startup CEO who's also still the CEO as it's regulated. So many of the US breakout companies are actually non-regulated. I think the closest might be Lemonade. You've probably got Daniel Schreiber, who's still the CEO of Lemonade, which is a regulated insurance company now and publicly listed. But I think that's probably the only one I can think of. And so I just think it's a function of being regulated as opposed to the size or the scale of the business. I'm reasonably confident that if Monzo wasn't a regulated bank, if it had taken a different path, whether it was like a Revolut or otherwise, I'm sure he'd still be running that business. And I think it was the regulatory requirements and the types of controls that were put into the bank and the sort of reporting that was required, all super reasonable, by the way. As a UK consumer, I'm really glad we have rigorous regulators, but it's a lot, and it's a very different mindset than what we or certainly, as you say, the US sort of sector would sort of index for in terms of founders. It's very different.
You got me good there then. Okay, that makes sense.
I also think, maybe just to reflect on that, I actually think, sorry to cut across, I think that's a case where I think about it now and I look back and I think as an investor group and as a board, maybe it's a bit too self-deprecating to say we let him down, but I think that we should have recognized this. What I just sort of laid out is, because hindsight's 2020. And so what I just said now probably sounds eminently sensible. And then so you'd be like, why didn't any of you see that at the time? I think we should have seen it. I think we should have recognized it. And I think if we had, for instance, brought in a great, I don't know what you want to call it, Sujata is a fantastic chief operating officer in that business now, but if we had brought her in sooner, if you brought in a, I don't know, president, what do you want to call it, senior VP of something, there were ways that I think we could have reinforced that team and that executive team, I think, in a way that would have made sure that the bank was growing the way a regulator would like to see it grow, with the right controls, with the right reporting, with the right balance, and probably preserved the sort of startup vibrancy and creativity, and culture that we all think of when we think about tech startups. There should have been a way that we could have channeled and had both. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think it's mutually exclusive in one single person and in one brain, but I think you could have put a couple of brains together, kind of to our earlier conversation topic about complementary teams. And I think we missed that. We definitely missed that.
And I think that's also, easy in hindsight to do with every business that just suddenly has, growth pains and is a swinging tiger. But then if we come back to the main theme of diversity, always when you look back, you just think about how if you could have rounded that out, perhaps it would have created that more collaborative, creative environment. But, you go back 3 years and think at that particular point, you just had, a business stress on your hands. You needed to put the right regulatory person in, and you don't feel like you can take the time. So it's always go back to the source and think, how can you do it perfect? And I suspect with, venture capital now, certainly I can see there's a lot more diversity initiatives. Catching that early on is also going to help make sure that, you don't get to post Series C and then things are just completely skew-if. So Eileen, obviously you're on Searching for Mana. So thanks for talking about, topical affairs, but we also want to find out a little bit about your background. So just to change the gears, could you think about really when you might have first felt like you found your mana in your career? And just to explain, mana is your magic.
I mean, I think that suggests that I've found it, or that I think I found it, or that I know it. And I know I'm getting on and I'm old enough and I should probably have thought about that already, but I do feel like I'm still searching and I'm still learning and I'm still growing, and I still very often have imposter syndrome and think that there's so much more I want to learn and experience or get exposed to and do better. I do think as I've gotten older, though, I just have the privilege, to not necessarily have a conventional boss. So even that structure, of course, my obligations and my fiduciary duties are to our fund investors. And so I have stakeholders that I am responsible for, but without a sort of a conventional boss, it means that I can sort of allocate my time, as I like to, and I can take risks where I want to, as long as, I feel like I'm doing right by our sort of responsibilities or our teams and our founders. I think that over the years, I've found that having the, I don't know what the word is. I don't know if it's just confidence or audacity, or it's just stubbornness to be authentic. I think that I've found that that ends up being just really, really powerful, and something that, first of all, people can't take it away from you. They could disagree with you, or they could sort of question your judgment. But if you're being authentic, if one's being authentic and one's sort of saying, this is actually what I think, and I'm not going to, hide it or pretend otherwise just to fit in, or just to appease somebody, or just because everybody else is saying it and I don't want to stand out. I think no one can take that away from you, therefore, and no one can sort of deny that. And then I think there is it's emboldened, I'm not going to say empowering, but it emboldens, to keep trying and doing that again and again. And then I think, once, at least for me, I was able to do that and sort of start to talk about the things that mattered to me. I guess other people then started to ascribe what they thought I stood for, and whether I thought that was actually important or not to convey. It seems to, be things that resonate with other people. And this is all different. This could be personal stuff, family forming stuff. It could be, diversity in the workforce. It could be, fintech. But I guess I come down to, if one is authentic and if you're talking about the things that really matter to you, one, it can't be denied or taken away from you. And two, you might find, it might not be everything, and it might not be the first thing, and it might not be the first 10 things, but at some point you're going to touch on something that resonates with somebody else. And that's really powerful, right? And that further emboldens you. And so really long-winded answer to your question. I think that if I were to reflect on, you said mana, and I would sort of say it's not a superpower, but something that I think has really helped me is feeling the confidence, or like I said, it could be arrogance, it could be stubbornness, and it could be cluelessness and lack of self-awareness, but to just sort of stick to my guns and say what I really think. And of course, I can only do that because I'm in a privileged position. I don't have a boss. I don't have to worry about getting fired as such. I can worry about getting canceled, and I can worry about trolls online disagreeing with me, but I'm in a really privileged position that I think I can speak my mind, not without repercussion, but, taking the responsibility of any consequences for myself.
But Eileen, do you feel like you had that influence from an earlier time, perhaps when you were growing up? Were there mentors? Was there parents? Was there family that instilled a confidence in you? Was it innate? Could you talk to that, please?
Yeah, I don't know. And I've tried to think about it because, of course, as a parent, I think about it for my own children. I think I'm lucky. I think certainly got it from watching both of my parents. Both my parents, worked. My mother was always working outside the home. And so I saw her, overcome what she would describe to me as difficult situations where she was, a quiet voice in the room. And so I think seeing that and sort of telling her, why wouldn't you say that out loud? Because we'd have a conversation. So, well, yeah, but I can't say that. And I would say, well, why can't you? And it's sort of the naivete of being a child that you ask those questions, that I remember asking those. And so, I asked them of myself. I part of the reason I kept going back to the fact that I'm privileged now is because I know I couldn't have been quite so emboldened or vocal early in my career. Yeah, you have to be able to, and be willing to do it. I've talked about publicly how I got fired from Skype, and I'm really lucky that it's okay. Like I was able to still pay my rent, even though I got fired from that job and didn't have another job lined up. And that is not, that's not everybody, or even the majority of people's situation. And I get that. So I've had that privilege, but I do think I've always sort of, I don't know, I've said this too. I think growing up as a sort of an ethnic minority in a predominantly sort of, suburban white community in America means that I was always used to being the outsider, at least having what I thought was a quieter voice. And so I thought I'd have to speak up louder in order to be heard. And so maybe it just comes from that.
So it feels like you had, as you say, a confidence, not necessarily an arrogance, but, if there's a decision to make, then you were going to make it with a feeling that there was a comfortable foundation. How how does somebody do that if we're talking about inclusiveness if they don't feel like that and that they're risking it all is potentially a trickier path. But potentially, if you want to, be a deal maker, then you have to be quite bullish in transactions. So if we look at again the report, then you tend to have, even when the diversity is relatively good in fintech businesses, a lot of the females in marketing functions or operation functions or things you might traditionally suspect, such as administrative or HR, and if on the C-suite, perhaps the people function. And so I was talking to a venture capitalist about this and said, well, what can you do about this? And it does seem to come back to why you had in finance and places like, Goldman Sachs traditionally, the males being the traders, because they're, whether it's innately or the confidence of the ecosystem that's been created, more of a bullishness. And that tends to just get you escalated through the ranks based on that perception. So what do we do about that? Do cultures have to analytically look at the value that people are bringing? Or is there, in combination, a training of that skill set that it sounds like you had, which is you can be ambitious, but it gets you nowhere unless you're confident. And so you need to have that confidence. What do you think about that?
I think it's all of the above. So I think it's definitely all of the above. I think the culture of these organizations that are typically feeder organizations, high performing, or, a place for ambitious younger people, I think it's pretty clear, I'm going to make a sweeping generalization, but I think it's very clear that more of them than not were often sort of misogynistic, really unfriendly to women, very homogenous, unfriendly to, ethnic minorities, and a culture that was not inclusive. And again, like I was saying, sort of at the top of the conversation, that doesn't change overnight. And I'm pleased to see, I think there's acknowledgement of that, but that's just been historical and that's been generation after generation. So it's going to take some time. And yes, those workplaces have to make a concerted effort to change those and to reflect and amplify the fact that they're changing those behaviors and those cultures. At the same time, 100%, I think we need to, society at large needs to raise its young girls and its children, boys as well, to demonstrate that girls and women are just as capable, competent, and strong leaders as men. And I talk about this all the time on social media. It's infuriating to me how gendered toys are, clothes are for 3-year-olds, 2-year-olds, shoes. You go buy a pair of trainers for a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old child. Honestly, maybe we can have a whole other podcast conversation about this, Lloyd, but tell me why a boys' trainers need to be labeled as boys' trainers and be a different color than a 3-year-old girl's trainers. That's, to me, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's just stupid. But what are we saying to both the boys and the girls? And you'll see it online. There are T-shirts, whether it's Tesco, Asda, M&S. The boys' clothes will be "Go explore, you can do this," and the girls' T-shirt will say "Be kind." And why is one action oriented and one is not? And it's everything and it's everywhere, and people don't mean it because it's so ingrained that we don't even realize it. But I've raised young children, and the nicest, like, they're friends. These are nice people. There's not, you run into people on the street or on the weekend, they're being really friendly to your kids. They're trying to say nice things. And they'll say, to the boys, "Oh, did you play football this morning? How was your football match? What have you, how was a sport or whatever?" And they'll say to the girl, "Isn't your hair really pretty today?" I mean, it's ridiculous, and it's involuntary. But yes, we have to change the workplace cultures for these feeder type organizations and all of them in general. But yes, we have to start raising more confident girls and more self-aware boys, and boys that aren't just told from the very start, or maybe it's okay that boys are told they can do whatever they want when they're really young, but we need to tell the same thing of girls.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a 3.5-year-old daughter, and if you ask her already what her favorite color is, it's pink. And so really try to think about, why is that? And if you do, it's because of the reasons that you just mentioned, which is just the overriding amount of clothes that either various relatives have brought as gifts or just are available in the shop. And so it just already is preset.
Yeah. And I didn't know you had a 3-year-old, but you should, I don't know if you know that before 1960 in America, pink was the color for boys. And so it's completely conditioning. It's just marketing. And it was just society that decided actually we'll put the girls in the pink and the boys in the blue when it used to be pink for the boys and white for the girls. Um, people forget that it doesn't mean anything. And also of my children, I've got 3 boys and 2 girls. Every single one of my boys, until they were about 3.5 years old, 4 years old, if you asked them what their favorite color was, it was actually red or pink. And it's not until they got into school when they saw all sorts of other that actually wasn't so cool for them to like pink. I remember going into a shop and I think he was 2, my 2-year-old second son wanted pink wellies. And of course it is, it's a good looking color. And so if it's before they get, it's, there's no reason, it's completely imposed. And it's, on the other hand, people will be like, what different, let them like whatever color they like for whatever reason. And I get that, but I think we have to think about the reason they've been led to those colors and what we're saying if we actually suggest one is stronger versus one being softer, and what the sort of, implied meaning of those things are, or those words and those descriptors.
So do you think by the time that you get to university, where there's a lot of initiative going on for visualization and understanding about the myriad of opportunities that exist everywhere, but also in tech, clearly you do, that issue is already ingrained, broadly speaking. So I look a lot at education and then into the workplace, but before that, have you looked at any companies or any initiatives, or are there any things that you could talk to as somebody who's got a 3.5-year-old daughter, where I can try and make sure that she has a rounded view of everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen that, some schools, they openly welcome, guest speakers, and it's going to be the schools for older children that have career days. But even before it's career days, there might be different parents are invited to talk about what their different lines of work might be. And, I hope that's not just all the dads. And I hope there's, women that come and talk about what they do at work as well. And even if the dads do go, and it's not just moms, that the dads talk about the women colleagues that they have, it's incumbent on all of us. It's not just we have to change, and get more women in there. We also have to make men more aware, again, of the subtle cues we see. It is that study, right? You ask, I don't know, a number of 7-year-olds what they visualize when you ask them what a company boss looks like, and how many of them are going to say it's a man, or you ask them to draw what a doctor looks like, what an astronaut looks like, what a train engineer looks like, a commercial airline pilot looks like, and it's a problem that they assume it's going to be a man.
Eileen, I think what's been really nice about the movement in fintech, and I genuinely believe this has been 99% the case for most people who have founded, invested, or been involved in it today, is that there is a purpose to a lot of it. A lot of fintech came around from in 2008, the financial recession, and trying to think, how can we trust banks? How can we manage our money better? But also, how can we lower the barrier of inclusion to a whole segment of the population who aren't able to, get sophisticated fund managers and so on and so forth. So that's what we'd be classing as Web 2. And, it's down the path and it's doing well, and we're all using various products. Of course, with the emergence of crypto and blockchain, we actually see, what I would say even more like a cult frontier. So I mean, today in the event, we've got NFTs in the space, which is possibly the first user case that we've actually had from crypto, which is great to see. As an investor, how are you looking at Web3, blockchain? Broadly speaking, but also, do you hope that might be the frontier that rounds out diversity as well, even further, and with the right purpose?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And I guess going backwards, or going in reverse order, answering your last question first, I would hope that all and any new sort of tech trends and sectors will help sort of continue to fuel or propel, the progress we're making towards diversity. I genuinely think that's the case. I think that everything that comes out, whether it's, I don't know, in health tech, med tech, or if it's in fintech, I think because we're making very slow progress, but because the progress is being made there, you by definition have a little more diversity each time, so that when we're incrementally innovating over time, we're going to still see the gains in that. So that's great. In terms of specifically like how we at Passion, or me personally, I look at sort of Web3 and those trends. I have to be honest with you, but also sort of disclaim, I, I and it will sound hilarious too, but in 2007, I didn't get Twitter. I remember having a conversation at the office at Passion Capital. And it was like, you just see, and I was like, I don't really buy it. Don't know. I remember saying, I don't know why I need to know what everybody ate for breakfast. I don't get it. And I went on there and tried it and sort of, obviously then I'm obviously a convert, and I'm I'm never the sort of the bleeding edge visionary. I'm a fast follower, I hope, but I believe in sort of underlying principles, and so I understood very quickly with Twitter. It was about sort of transparency, access, accessibility, and connections. And I think for me, with blockchain, for example, or distributed ledgers, and as we're moving into like NFT and other elements of Web3, for me, what I've loved about it is the principles behind it. So decentralized, the fact that we have distributed, that you don't have a centralized function or oversight body or something like that. And I think those principles are really, really powerful. We don't invest in them as a sector, much as we never said we're going to invest in AI. We don't even say we're actually going to invest in fintech. It's just, we look for backing really great founders. It turns out, I think we attract a lot of fintech founders because of the fintech successes we've had. So it just sort of is a flywheel effect. But we're not going to look for, blockchain investments, as we don't have a quota, just like we don't for fintech, just like we don't for artificial intelligence. I think they're enabling technologies that should hopefully be part of the enablement or the platform and the underlying principles of something that we believe could be really, really massive, could be really impactful, is going to be driven by a really diverse team and set of principles. And so we think of it that way.
Amazing. Eileen, very generously given almost the quota of your time. So just going to, 2 final questions. I opened up to the floor for anybody to ask you any question, and this one's from Ollie, our director of Mana Ventures. On the other side of the table in the VC world, we see the stereotypes of Caucasian gentlemen, Patagonia gilets, Vijas, lensless glasses, suits and sneakers, maybe cobbled together with an MBA. What's your perception of diversity within venture capital? And more crucially, how do you see VC attire evolving?
Well, I don't. This is a great question. I love the punchline. I mean, I don't know. I think VC attire has been what was just described there forever. The last 2 decades. I don't know if it's changed very much. Maybe there was a trend of Allbirds at a time. It was sort of chinos for a long time. Now it's more athleisure, I guess.
It's like Lululemon now, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think it's always going to be somewhat more casual than banking. So as banking gets more casual, I guess venture just is going to get even more casual. I think it comes from investors probably trying to be relatable and approachable, or looking more credible to a founder. So they're probably reflecting what they think founders want to see. It's a funny. I've never thought about it that much. I am definitely a slave to comfort, and so I have quickly adopted athleisure. I have never really worn too much formal clothing. I haven't worn high heels, which I guess would have been business attire for women for I don't know, years before the pandemic. So it's not really even a Corona thing. I can blame it. I think it's just as soon as I started carrying children around. So I guess it's going to continue to get more and more comfortable. Can I just say, I don't like this VC trend. It's more in the US. I haven't seen it in the UK. I don't like people who are on their exercise bikes while they're on board calls. I find that really off-putting. Or if they're going to do that, I would rather they turn their camera off, because I don't really want to see them
Do you find that a disrespect?
I don't know if I think it's disrespectful, because I guess if the founders don't think it's disrespectful, I shouldn't, because they're just a fellow board director. I just don't want to see it. going through some kind of physical exertion while we're on a call. So that would be something that I would say is a trend I don't really like, but maybe that'll never cross the pond. In terms of the original question about what I think diversity in venture looks like, to the point, it's so homogenous. Any kind of diversity is good diversity. So age, gender, ethnicity, social class, my kids probably want to go to Oxford or Cambridge. I think they're great institutions. We could do with a few more venture capital investors that didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge here in the UK. I'm not saying I don't like them. We need more diversity. And I think social class is a big one, because I suspect as investors, we miss out on a lot of opportunities because we're probably thinking of a certain target customer. And I think we miss out on the mass market in a big way. So yeah, any kind of diversity is going to be good in venture because we are starting from such a low bar and such a homogenous sample.
I think that you've talked really eloquently about diversity, so you've taken my final question and just covered it there. So I'm just going to ask you, we've already covered what your mana is. Have you had in your career a hero yourself? And I wonder if you have, what their mana was.
I have thought about that a lot because I've been asked that a lot. I don't think I have any single one, which I probably, and I'm sure it's part of it. We're all, only human. So everyone's got flaws. And I think what I've probably thought about is like a composite of different people. So for different circumstances, I'll think about different people who have influenced me, different managers I've had, different people that I've worked for, different colleagues I've worked with, different people I've negotiated against, for example. And so I just think I take from different people in different circumstances. And like I said, it's a composite. I don't have a single person I would hold up. And I think there's too many people that I would want to credit and thank if somebody ever were to ask me like who my greatest influence.
Is there perhaps then, I want to extract some value from you here on this last question. Is there perhaps someone who would be a hero that you would recommend coming onto the Searching for Mana show who would be representing, inclusive and diverse background?
Ooh, that's a great question. Yeah, there probably are some people that I would think about, and I would want to, for example, if we wanted to stay with financial services, I'm a big fan of Jainan Gadia, who now runs Scoop, and she's previously Virgin Money. I mean, I think I'd love to learn more about her background. I think that she's talked about some personal journeys and family forming journeys as well, which I talk openly about, and which I think more men and women should be open about, because it takes up so much of our headspace and is really most of our energy. And for anyone who's started a family, we know that that really helps to prioritize and crystallize what's important in life. But obviously she's worked with some very strong personalities, and she's worked with different types of boardrooms. So she would be somebody that I would love to see and hear more from. But there's a lot. I think that, we have so many great role models that are probably not, I think they're busy, but also I think some of the strongest role models and people that I think about when I mention the composite that I build, they're not self-promotional. And that's something that I think is really important. Ironic, because I know I'm talking to you on a public stage right now, but I try not to be overly self-promotional for whatever that's worth. And I think that, yeah, there are lots of people that we could all learn from.
Well, you definitely got Chase to be on the show, so it wasn't you reaching out to us on that point. Thank you so much for spending your evening on the Searching for Mana show, and I'm sure the audience can have a nice clap for.
That's really kind. Thanks again for having me. And I am really sorry I'm not there in person. I really am sorry. I'm sorry. I was so high maintenance. I feel very diva-esque, but I appreciate your accommodation and letting me dial in. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Eileen. Bye-bye.